Mhm. Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of the UIMS alumni team and our speaker, Mr. Itani, who will be talking to us about how to ace the step one. So, all yours, Mr. Itani.
All right, so you guys can see the screen, right? Everyone can see it. It's absolutely fine. All right. So, hey guys, my name is Deeb. I am a fifth-year medical student at the Second Faculty of Medicine. I recently took the step one back in September and I passed it in October. So today I'm just going to be giving you guys a brief talk about what I did exactly to study for it and how I studied and my time schedule and all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So here's an overview of how I'm going to go down through the talk. Don't worry, I won't bore you out with what the USMLE is specifically. You guys probably know it by now. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to spend more detail on this part of the entire lecture. So let's move forward with that in mind. What's the USMLE? As you guys know, it stands for the United States Medical Licensing Exam. It's a three-part exam that's taken by students who want to practice medicine in the United States one day. And it's made up of three parts: the step one, the step two CK, and the step three. Some of you may know that a few years ago, there was another version of the step two called step two CS, but that one was paused when the pandemic started, the COVID pandemic, and then it was canceled indefinitely. So now we just have these three exams that we have to take. And this lecture specifically is only going to be about the step one. It has nothing to do with the step two CK or the step three. So just some details. You guys might know that the step one is going to assess your basic science concepts and your ability to apply these concepts to medical practice. The step one is a one-day examination. It's divided into 7 blocks. Each block is 60 minutes long and has 40 questions, and it has a total of 280 questions. The entire exam will take you 8 hours. That's because you have a 45-minute break, but there's also a 15-minute tutorial, which you could skip. So in all, you're going to have a 1-hour break. So 8 hours in all. Like I said, traditionally, it's been scored between 1 and 300 points, with the minimum passing score being 196. But as of January 2022, it's now pass-fail. But still, the minimum passing score is a 196 for it. So from now on, your score reports, you're just going to see a pass or a fail. You're not going to see anything numerical. The step 2 CK, so if the step one assesses your basic preclinical knowledge, the step 2 CK essentially assesses your ability to apply your medical knowledge in a clinical setting, in a supervised setting specifically. Once again, step 2 CK is a one-day examination. It's 9 hours long. It has 8 sections this time. Each section is 60 minutes long, with up to 40 questions and a total of 318 questions. Once again, you get an hour break between everything. You get an hour break for the entire day, and I'll go over how to use these breaks eventually. And step 3 is the last exam you have to take. It assesses you as a doctor in general and your ability to practice medicine in a unsupervised setting. It's a 2-day exam, 233 questions on the first day, then 180 questions on the second day across 6 blocks and 13 computer-based simulations. The prerequisites to do the step 3 is to finish the step 1 and the step 2 CK and to have your degree as a doctor. But that's way down the line. So for today, let's start talking about the step 1. So how is the exam divided? As many of you may know, it will test your preclinical knowledge, right? So everything that you've taken since the first day they stepped into medical school up until 4th year stuff in the second faculty at least. So I want you to take a look at this graph, memorize it and look at it. There's stuff that are called high yield and low yield subjects. The high yield subjects are pathology and physiology and biochemistry and pharmacology. Almost always it's in this order. It's a pathology based exam. It's an exam that will test your knowledge of pathology and how well you know it and how well you know physiology. They love these two more than anything. Let's say you have a 40 question Q bank that you're solving. I think almost 30 questions will be these big 4 right here. So for the most part, you have to know these really very well. And as you can see, it tests some microbiology, some anatomy, some psychology or psychiatry, and then histology, cell biology, embryology, and genetics are minimally tested usually. Other things, another way that's divided, these are the systems that are covered within the step 1, everything from behavioral health, so psychology, psychiatry, to neurology, to reproductive systems, to respiratory and renal systems, hematology and oncology, and musculoskeletal systems and cardiovascular systems, and sometimes general principles where they group together more than one concept in one question. That those are most of the questions that are tested on test day. Maybe you haven't taken all these subjects yet. I know in fourth year we haven't taken, now I'm in fifth year, but when I finished fourth year, we haven't taken hematology, oncology, and we haven't taken neurology. So those were two things I had to learn on my own for the step one. And many of you may have to do that, and that's absolutely fine. I just want to say it's doable. Don't be scared about it. And I'll tell you how to study for them soon. So let's talk about the timeline to study for the step one. So traditionally there's two timelines, or sorry, there's two study periods. There's the undedicated study period and the dedicated study period. So undedicated traditionally, it really starts when you start medical school. It's everything that you've taken since the beginning of medical school, your anatomy, your histology, your cell biology, physiology, pathophysiology, all that stuff, up until you start doing your dedicated period. But the way that I did my undedicated period was 4 to 6 months. I started in January or February of 2021. That's when I started studying for the step one properly. And the dedicated period is a time where you're studying only for the step one specifically. Usually it's taken in the summer. I had a friend who took it back in August. I took it in September because the summer is free. During the dedicated study period, you'll be studying the step one specifically and focusing solely on it the whole day. During the undedicated study period, you're going to be focusing on medical school. You still have to pass your courses in medical school. So maybe study for it, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, maybe every other day or something like that. So, and these numbers, they're not solid. It's not set, it's not set in stone. You can have, some students need 4 weeks to do the dedicated period. Some people need 8 weeks. For me personally, I took 6 weeks for my dedicated period and around 5 months for my undedicated period. So it really depends on you as a student and how long you need to study for it and how long you have to go through first aid and the other sources. So like I said, here's my timeline specifically. So back in December 2021, I bought the Boards and Beyond video lecture series and I started studying it and watching it passively. What I mean by that is that if I had, a free night, I had nothing to do, or I finished classes and I just wanted to study some stuff, I would watch some of his videos. It's an all right video lecture series. I'll get to it soon during the lecture. But yeah, that's what I started with. Then in January and February, I finally put down a schedule, and each week I started going through a section of the first aid book and the corresponding pathoma chapter every week, and I tried to finish one section per week. So by June 2022, I had gone through first aid at least twice, and that's when I started solving question banks. So July and September is when I had my dedicated study period. And during that time, I solely studied from first aid and pathoma and UWorld question banks. And eventually I took the test on September 19th. I neither delayed it nor did I bring it back. And I don't think there's a reason that anyone should do that. So here are the resources that I used. The most common protocol for the step one is called UFAP protocol, which stands for UWorld, First Aid, and Pathoma. This is highly recommended. Like 9 out of 10 students use this protocol. I highly recommend you guys use it. I think it's the best one that covers all subjects and all recommended material that's high yield. I'll go through these specifically in the next slide. Other stuff that I use is Sketchy Micro. I'm almost certain everybody here knows it. It's what we use to study microbiology. And I watched it only once during my dedicated period because I still remember it. So it's extremely efficient to study microbiology specifically from Sketchy Micro. Boards and Beyond, like I said, it's a video lecture series. It covers almost everything that's required for the step one. I used it somewhat to review my physiology specifically because I found out that my physiology was lacking completely. And it was the reason I wasn't scoring high at the beginning. That's what I use it for, but unless otherwise, I thought it was insanely detailed for what the step one needed specifically. So I would use it with caution. Other resources that I recommend are Golian audio lectures. These are also pathology lectures that people use during their dedicated period, but don't use them as a replacement for the pathoma lectures. Pathoma, it's like the gold standard for the step one, so don't replace it with the Golian audio lectures. The Golian audio lectures, you could use it to supplement, for example, or to review pathology, but do not substitute it with pathoma. And then there's Costanza Physiology, which is the textbook that we use during second year to study physiology. I personally didn't use it during my dedicated period because I don't like reading through textbooks that much. and I felt it would be a waste of time for me. So like I said, I used Boards and Beyond for my physiology review. Then there's QBanks, which is where you actually practice applying your knowledge. Because keep in mind that the step one, it's not an exam of memory. It's an exam of applying your knowledge to new situations. You know, each question you will be presented with something new that you've never ever seen in any textbook, and they want to test how well you can apply your knowledge to that certain scenario. So QBanks is where you're going to be practicing, and this is what's going to make the difference in whether or not you pass the exam. You could read all the books in the world. If you could watch Sketchy 10 times, but if you don't do practice, if you don't do QBanks and you don't understand them well and you don't do practice tests, then it's almost useless. So for QBanks, there's many variants. The best one that you should use, that's part of the UFAP protocol, is called UWorld. It's the best QBank you could possibly ask for. It always teaches you something new. It's highly interactive, the interface for it, and I'll talk about it soon in the next slides. Another QBank that I used personally was the USMLE RX. This is made by the authors of the first aid book, so it goes hand in hand with the textbook, and you could reference the textbook very easily. So I got these two. Boards and Beyond video lecture series actually comes with the QBank once you buy the video lecture series. I personally didn't solve much of this, but I felt the questions that I solved were too focused on the video lectures themselves instead of, it was testing how much you memorize from the lectures themselves instead of testing your knowledge like UWorld did. Then we have AMBOSS questions. Personally, I thought AMBOSS questions were insanely hard for the step one. I know they're very useful for the step two CK, so I didn't solve much of it. We have a QBank here at LF2, so but I didn't use it regardless. Past test and Kaplan in general are almost never used. Kaplan is used mostly for step three. So for practice test, this is where you test your knowledge. The most common sources used for practice tests are the NBMEs, or the National Board of Medical Examiner tests. These are the best tests that you could use, and they are the most reflective of the actual test. There's 5 forms that get updated every few years. Each form costs around $65 US, so it's pretty pricey, but I'll talk about the costs of the step one specifically in the next few slides. Then you have another practice test called the UWorld Self-Assessment 1. This will come with your subscription of UWorld, so you have 2 tests here that you could solve. Then you have the free 120 test, which, as the name suggests, is just a free test that you could solve. I personally felt that this was the most representative of the test, but I'll get back to that later as well. So let's talk about the first aid for the USMLE Step 1. It's the most common textbook that students use to study for the Step 1. It's a book made by McGraw-Hill. It covers most topics in a concise format. It should be used hand in hand along with the pathoma book, because remember the UFAP protocol, it should be used with it, because I felt that the first aid pathology sections were completely useless. Most of the pathology will come from the pathoma book specifically, so you have to use this book with it. You can use it to take notes or to annotate if you're watching Boards and Beyond videos, or if you want to annotate more pathology into it, there's absolutely no problem. Or if you're solving UWorld, for example, and you learn something new and you want to annotate the book, that's why you have it, that's why you buy it, it's for you, you can do whatever you want to do with it. I still use it personally during 5th year, sometimes to reference it, so it's like, it's an extremely useful book. It's one of the very few textbooks I actually completely read in medical school, so highly recommended. Next, we have Pathoma, Fundamentals of Pathology. This is a pathology book that we actually use in 3rd year and 2nd faculty of medicine to study pathology, and I'm almost certain almost everyone has used it to study pathology in their faculties as well. It's a pathology book that covers most of the high yield topics for the step 1. It explains stuff in amazing detail and points out which details are extremely high yield and are extremely important to know for the step 1. It provides the best foundation of pathology, which is needed to pass the step 1. Because remember, like I said previously, that the step 1, it's an exam of applying your knowledge, and most of that knowledge will be pathology based. Next, we have the UWorld QBank. Like I said, the UWorld QBank, I think it's made by the creators of the step 1. So, you know, QBanks in general are expensive to buy. I'm not going to lie to you. But if there's one QBank that you have to buy, that you must buy, it's definitely UWorld. Do not buy anything but UWorld if you're not going to buy anything else. You definitely need this question bank. It's a question bank made up of around 3,700 questions. It's more of a textbook. The way I saw it is that it's more of a textbook disguised as a QBank, because when you solve it, you get a question and you get a question right or wrong. The explanations are so well explained and so detailed that I felt I was learning something new every day. I solved QBanks. It has a highly interactive interface, and what you could do with it is that you could just copy the answers and make them into flashcards that have a similar algorithm like Anki's, and you could review the flashcards as often as you want, every couple of days. And it even has a notebook section where you could just copy and paste and easily save time instead of writing everything down. You could save time, you could make notes, you can make flashcards and review them. So I found UWorld to be the best resource you could possibly use for the step one. I've even seen videos on YouTube of people who've taken the step one who've done nothing else but solve question banks, and specifically UWorld. They didn't touch the first aid book or the Pathelma book, and they scored really high scores when the exam was still numerical. But with that in mind, those are like outliers and insanely smart people. But so I highly recommend that you stick to the UFAC protocol and get these three guys specifically. Like I said, for microbiology, I use Sketchy Micro, and that's what I used in a nutshell, really. So let's talk about the cost of the step one very briefly. So you might know the step one is pretty expensive to take. The registration for the step one on its own is $950 US. The international fee for anyone who's taking it outside of the United States or Canada is $185 to register for the step one and pay the international fee. You have to make an ECFMG account, which has a registration fee as well of $160. In addition to that, QBanks are really expensive. If we go back to the QBank, to the resources that I use, UWorld, I remember, is around $450 for a 3-month subscription. I think $600 for a 6-month subscription. USMLE RX is around $100 for a 3-month subscription. Boards and Beyond is $200 for a 6-month subscription as well. And Boss, we have it from my faculty, and these guys, I never messed with them, so I don't know how much do they cost. The NBME tests, each one costs $65 US. So if you buy all of them, that's maybe $400 you're looking at, or $600, sorry. UWorld Self-Assessment 1 comes with the UWorld QBank, like I said. So all in all, with all the QBanks and the books and the video lectures and the NBME exams, you're looking at around spending a grand total of $2,000 in all. It depends on how much you want to buy specifically, how much QBanks you want to spend on, and how many video lectures, but that's what I spent around. So that's just the cost of the step one. Some resources that I didn't use personally included Anki's. I think I'm part of the 1% in my faculty that never used Anki's. Even during anatomy in first year, I used it for 1 or 2 tests. I personally never found it useful for me personally, but for the step one specifically, there's a big deck of Anki's called Zanki or Anking, I think. Regardless, it's a very big it's a very big deck of cards. I think it's around 30,000 cards that's used by many students to study for, but I found it useful because I felt that it was showing me stuff that I already knew. I think it's useful to use it when you're seeing stuff for the first time and you have to memorize them. But at this point, at 4th year, I'm almost certain everybody knows anatomy, histology, physiology, pharmacology. So I think the Zanki deck is supposed to be used during first year specifically, so I never used that. Firecracker are a bunch of lectures and QBanks I found completely useless. Kaplan lectures were insanely long and way too detailed for the step one, and I found them to be useless as well. Kaplan is the main resource for the step 3 specifically, so for the step one, I just would not recommend them at all. And Dr. Najib lectures, you know, I'm almost certain here, everyone here has seen Dr. Najib lectures, and they are what they're worth, just long and unnecessarily detailed, way too long in my opinion. So I would not recommend using for the step one. So let's get down to my schedule. Here's my daily schedule for my dedicated period specifically. During my undedicated period, I never really followed a specific schedule. I would just cram in 2 hours or 3 hours every day to try to study the step one and finish whatever section I was studying for that week. But for the daily schedule during my dedicated period, which was from July 25 to September 18, 2022, here's exactly what I did for around 6 weeks. I'd wake up every morning at 5:30 a.m. and I'd have my breakfast and prepare myself mentally and all that stuff. And I start studying at 7 a.m. I divided my day into a morning block, an afternoon block, and an evening block. In the morning block, I solved the UWorld Bank from 7 a.m. till 8 a.m., 40 questions, timed and random. Then from 8 o'clock to 11:30, I would review the block that I just solved, see where my wrong answers are, make flashcards, you know, see if I guessed on something, and essentially learn what mistakes I did. Then I took a break from 11:30 to 12. That's when my afternoon block started. From 12 to 2 p.m., I'd study the corresponding first aid chapter that I had and the pathoma chapter that went with it. From 2 to 3, I took a nap because that's just how I function. From 3 to 5, I continued first aid and pathoma. From 5 to 6:30, I had dinner or lunch or dinner, whatever you want to call it. And then in my evening block from 6:30 to 10:30 p.m., I was exhausted, but I would still push through and go through first aid and pathoma and review UWorld flashcards. With that in mind, once again, the schedule may not apply to everyone. There's absolutely no reason for you to start studying from 7 till 10:30 p.m. Maybe you just need 8 hours of study every day, maybe 6 hours of study during your dedicated period. It's what works for you at the end of the day. This is just my schedule. So if you want to take a look at it specifically, what I did, that's how I followed it for the next 2 months. So this was my daily schedule. Next, I have a screenshot of what was my monthly schedule. And as you can see, the schedule, I got it from a video on YouTube from a YouTube channel called Med School Insiders. I provided a link at the end of this talk for you to go take a look at that schedule if you liked it. I just took the schedule from that website and I made it into my own. And here it explains in detail what I did every day. So for example, on the first day that I started studying, which was July 25, you can see in my morning block, I did 10 questions of UWorld. I did biochem, some more biochem. Then in the evening, I solved a UWorld block of 40 questions, and I would record my progress every day. Recording my progress was never really to assess. I recorded my progress, but not as an assessment because UWorld is a learning tool. It's not an assessment tool. So disregard the percentages that you see here. If you don't see them increasing dramatically or linearly, that's absolutely fine. Some days are good days, some days are bad days, as you can see. Some days are really good days. So I just kept it to see if I'm going to improve or not, and I did improve eventually, and I'll show you. But as you can see, I divided my schedule according to the first aid book. So, for example, I looked at biochem and I counted how many pages it has in the first aid book, and I thought that it would take me around 2 days to finish biochem, or a day and a half, and the schedule changed, and eventually it did take me 2 days, right? So I was done with it by Wednesday of July 27, and then I started immunology, right? I would solve, then and the next day I finished immunology, and that's how I organized studying from the first aid book. I just divided it on the days, and however long a section took me, it took me. Essentially, I didn't really care. I went through the first aid book twice during my dedicated study period, following a similar schedule and going through it again. And as you guys see, on Saturdays, I'll take a weekend off, and I'll just hang out with my friends on Sunday and do absolutely nothing because I wanted to recharge and relax before the second week started. And remember, this schedule, you don't have to follow it. It's not concrete for everyone. For example, during my second week, I changed it completely because I found out that my physiology was absolutely horrible. So I watched Boards and Beyond videos, but just, kept my schedule and just changed it the way it is like that. And as you can see, another weekend, and it goes on. It was a pretty long schedule. And I also took progress of my NBME test. Here is the schedule towards the very end of the dedicated study period. Now we're in September. As you can see, I kept taking tests. My scores kept improving, and then eventually my test was on September 19. Once again, like I said, here's the UWorld Q banks. Eventually they did improve, and you should see an improvement in general. If you're studying and you start off with a 56%, and by the end of it, you're still scoring at 56%, then you're probably doing something completely wrong, and you should probably postpone the exam, which I don't recommend you do usually. And here's just, some statistics of how many questions that I used. Out of 3,700, I only used around 1,009 or 2,000, and I still had 1,750 that weren't used. That's just me. I never managed to finish all of UWorld because I started solving it too late. But I'll get to that later. So yeah, that's my schedule specifically for whoever was asking, because I know a lot of people are asking how exactly did you study for it. And like I said, I'll provide you with a link for it at the end of this talk. So when it comes down to tracking progress, it's extremely important. Like I said in the previous slide, NBMEs are what track your progress. They are assessment tools, not the UWorld. The UWorld Q Bank is a learning tool. So whatever percentages you get, like I said, disregard them because some days are going to be extremely horrifying. The scores will be extremely low, and other days they will be extremely high. It's the NBME exams that test how well you're doing. And as you can see, my scores increased over time, and eventually I was in a much better zone. I felt really comfortable taking the exam at this point. But I will get back to this at the end of my talk, because there's something I want to discuss about reviewing your NBME specifically. So for test day, some recommendations I have: do not study. I mean, it goes without saying, but do not study anything the day before. You'll be completely nervous the day before. So just sit down and try to relax, and go out, have lunch, hang out with your friends if you want, but just don't study anything, because you'll make yourself way more nervous. Maybe if you want, just maybe review some high yield equations. That's what I did. For 1 hour specifically, I reviewed equations for biostats, for example, or for example, stroke volume. Sometimes they might ask you to calculate the partial pressure of oxygen inside the lungs. So maybe high yield equations, which are mentioned at the end of the first aid book, go through those for 1 hour, and that's it. Do not review anything else. At this point, you should be ready. There's absolutely nothing. You either know it or you don't. There's absolutely nothing you can do at this point to study. The night before, try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I'll tell you from now, it's extremely hard to do that. You'll be getting up every hour, but try to sleep as best as you can, because you're going to need as much energy and as much mental endurance as you could possibly get during the next day. Have a good and filling breakfast. Obviously, you need energy throughout the day. Make sure that you arrive at least half an hour before your test starts at the test center. If you arrive late to the exam, specifically half an hour late or more, they may not admit you to the exam. So be careful, so try to arrive early. It's not worth missing this exam, because if you miss it, you don't get to postpone it. You just wasted money at that point. You're allowed to bring snacks and to eat between each break. So bring as much snacks as you can. For me personally, I brought those Nutri-Grain cereal bars, something with high sugar and high energy, and I was drinking Pepsi the entire day to keep my glucose high, essentially, so I could keep focusing on the test. So bring as many snacks as you want. One thing you should not do under any circumstance, do not under any circumstance pull out your phone during breaks, because if you do that, they will report it to the test committee and they could cancel your exam possibly, and they will probably do that if they had a chance. So do not pull out your phone. Just turn it off before you head in, because you're going to hand over all your stuff anyway, and between every break that you have, they're going to scan you with a metal detector. They're going to roll up your sleeve and check your ankles and everything. So you're not going to take anything with you inside the test. Now for the next 3 points, this is what you should take home for the test day specifically. Treat each section that you solve on its own. So like I said in the beginning, this exam has 7 sections, right? When you take it on test day, treat each section as if it is its own test, right? What I mean by that is, for example, let's say you're completely nervous and you start taking the test and you finish the first section and you feel you didn't do good on the first section. It's fine, for what it's worth, it's done, it's in the past. There's absolutely nothing you can do in this world to change what happened. All right, so go take your break, go to the bathroom, wash your face, have your snack, drink something, and relax. Come in and take the second question and start taking the second section as if it has nothing to do with the first section. Because if you do bad on the first section or the second section, for example, and you get nervous, then you'll start doing bad on the second section, then the third section, then you can have this snowball effect where you're going to mess up your entire exam essentially. So on test day, just try as best as you can to calm your nerves. And if you do bad on one section, it's not the end of the world. You have other sections for a reason. For me specifically, I thought that my first section was fine, my second section was fine, my third section was fine. My fourth section, I think I messed up, but like I said, I just kept my focus. So my fifth section was fine. My sixth section was probably messed up, but my seventh section was absolutely fine in my opinion, and I passed for what it's worth. So like I said, just keep calm really and try to focus during the test day. If you mess up any section, it's absolutely fine. Do not get hung up on do not get hung up on one question. And what I mean by that is, like I said, you have 40 questions and you have 60 minutes for each block. So ideally you have around 1 minute and 10 seconds to 20 seconds to solve the questions, right? So if you're looking at a question and it's extremely hard and you're stuck between 2 answer choices, don't waste too much time on which one is correct. If you have a hunch or something about one of the answers being correct and you're not sure, just choose that one. It's most likely correct. You have absolutely no reason to spend 2 or 3 or 4 minutes on one question that you're uncertain of, because time will fly when you take the step 1. It will pass by very, 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 very quickly. And last but not least, do not under any circumstance change your answer. Never change your answer when you're taking the test. It's absolutely useless. Almost every time I did that, I ended up changing my answer from the correct one to the incorrect one. Even if you have a hunch and you're guessing, just go with your hunch. It's most likely right. 9 times out of 10, it is most likely right. You have absolutely no reason to change your answer. So please don't lose your nerve on test day and start changing your answers completely. And last but not least, breathe, obviously, and believe in yourself. You got this. This exam is big, it's grueling, it's arguably the hardest test you'll take in your life and in your medical career. It's all that, obviously, but I think with adequate preparation and adequate time and study strategies, I really think that everyone here should pass it, and there's no reason you shouldn't pass it. So motivation, it's a big thing for the step one. And you're studying for it during the dedicated period. It's harsh, it's grueling, it's gonna test you, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So motivation is a big thing because you're gonna have some very long days and you gotta keep yourself going. And motivation, it varies from person to person. For me specifically, I always knew I wanted to work in the States one day, most likely. And I always knew I had to take the step one, and I want to take down the step one and pass it. So intrinsically, I had this intrinsic motivation of, this is the moment, this is it for me. I've been waiting for this moment. I want to finish the step one and I want to pass it no matter what the cost is. So that's what motivated me, just my own mind. That was my source of motivation. And the source of motivation could change for everyone, obviously. Maybe if you have a bunch of friends who are taking it with you, you can make a friends group on WhatsApp where you guys could share your scores to motivate each other, have maybe friendly competition. You don't have to do that, obviously. You don't have to share your scores, but regardless, make a group, motivate each other, bounce ideas off each other. Maybe that's what's going to motivate you. Maybe family motivates you, spending time with your family, a little pep talk from mom or dad or your dog or something like that could help you probably stay motivated. Maybe on your off days, or if you have a break, like for me, I took Sundays off. Maybe on that day off, you could go shadowing, with a physician and spend your day at the hospital so you could remember why you're doing this. So one day you could end up in that certain environment. And I want to say it's also all right to take breaks. If you notice that you have an off day or two, it's all right to step away for a day or two, breathe and relax, just reassure yourself, talk to someone that's important to you who can motivate you, find your source of motivation, get your head back in the game, and go back to studying. It's all right to take breaks, so don't stress yourself too much. So I want to end with some things that I would have done differently, which I recommend for you guys, and some closing thoughts. So one thing I would do differently is I would definitely start by reviewing pathoma and physiology first. Now, I had a lot of advice from upper years, obviously, so I want to say thanks to them. I watched a lot of YouTube videos to figure out how to study for the step one. But the one thing that I wasn't told really specifically was that the exam is pathology based and physiology based. Like let's assume you have a block that has 40 questions. Maybe 10 out of those questions will be pathology based, another 9 will be physiology based, and then 8 will be pharmacology based, and then the rest, the 10, will be divided according to the other subjects that I showed you before. So I would start by reviewing pathoma and physio before studying first aid. Let's say you're taking it this year, ideally in the summer in 2023. I would start with pathoma and physiology now in November. Like I would study pathoma and memorize it and understand it. Like understand pathoma as well as you can. They will ask great details from pathoma and physiology specifically. They love bringing graphs and showing you how they alternate and what would change if you do this or that. So these two are extremely high yield. With that in mind, be sure to memorize as well. It's a test of applying your knowledge, like I said previously, but you have to memorize that knowledge first. But make sure that you understand it more than you memorize it. Something else I would have started doing is solving earlier, solving Q banks specifically. I started solving Q banks, I think in June. Yeah, I think it was June 1, and my exam was in September, so that was insanely late. By the end of it, I was solving 80 questions a day of UWorld just to make up, which wasn't the best idea. But anyway, the reason I started solving late is personally, well, you can go to Amboss right now and do 10 questions, just open 10 questions for fun and look at the questions. I mean, they're horrifying to look at first. You don't know what they're talking about. You have a minute and 20 seconds to solve it. I personally got terrified from solving them, so I kept reading textbooks and reviewing textbooks, and I never solved questions early on. That could have been a mistake, but eventually I managed to get to the style of questions, and I managed to solve enough questions to pass. Because one thing in the second faculty specifically is most of our exams are oral based. So I think half the challenge of the step one specifically is being able to read these board style questions, you know, take out all the unnecessary details and know what they're asking for and being able to solve them correctly within a certain amount of time. So that's something I would have done as well. Another thing that I would have done is review the NBMU word for word. This one right here, had I not done this, I think I would have failed this step one because I knew my mistake and I wasn't working on it. So let's go back here to tracking my progress. If you look, you know, NBME 26, I scored a 64% on it on August 28th. NBME 27, which I scored a 67% on it, was on August 20. And NBME 28, I scored a 68% on August 27. So, you know, around 3-week time period, I barely made any improvement. And for what it's worth, I knew where I went wrong. It's because if I showed you my schedule, you know, I would take a test on a Saturday usually, and my weekend would start, right? So I just finished the test. I go hang out with my friends, and Sunday I do nothing. And the week after, I'd go back to studying from first aid and pathoma. I would not review my NBMEs. And that was one of my biggest mistakes. So I had to take out almost a week to review these tests, to review them word for word. And when I did that and I reviewed both my right and my correct and my incorrect answers, it's when I started understanding the concepts and how they connect and what I did wrong and where my thought process was incorrect. And as you could see, eventually within a week, almost immediately, my scores improved and they kept shooting up. And eventually, this was my last exam that I took. It was 2 days before the test. I would say that for me personally, I felt that the free 120 was most representative of the test, but most people say NBMEs are. I think it's pretty subjective. I personally don't remember my test at this point, so it depends on you. But in general, going back to this slide, make sure that you review your NBMEs word for word. I think it's extremely important. And if you don't do that, you know, one could possibly fail the step one. Maybe I would have put more time to review my UWorld flashcards, which were Anki's Essentials. Maybe I would have reviewed something or learned something new. I don't know specifically. Like I told you, I don't like using Anki's and reviewing flashcards that often. I had it in my schedule, but I never really did that. What I did instead was I reread the first 4 chapters of Pathoma, which were extremely high yield. That's what I did personally. Some things I wouldn't do is I would not go through Q banks again, or read through them a second time. That's something that I saw specifically that med students in the US do. When they start solving Q banks, specifically UWorld, they try to finish it once, you know, and learn from it. Because like I said, it's essentially a textbook. They try to finish it once, then they try to go through it again, solving it again. And for me personally, I just don't see why you would do that, because I think you're better off solving new questions and new question banks to keep applying your knowledge. Because like I said, the exam is about applying your knowledge to new situations. It's not an exam of memory. So I felt that if I reviewed Q banks, my memory is really good in my opinion. So if I reviewed a Q bank and I saw a question that I already went through, I would probably just remember the answer and it would not test my knowledge. And I wouldn't learn anything new. So I felt this was more of a waste of time. So don't go through Q banks a second time. That's my recommendation. If you want to, go ahead. I'm not stopping you, but I would solve a different Q bank if I had the chance. Also, I would not postpone the exam if you don't feel ready. In life, you know, if you're ready for any test, and the step one is definitely that test. You're gonna study for it for a really long time, and everything is gonna come together. Will you know everything 100%? You will not, but it's absolutely fine. You know, if you're studying and your scores are pretty good, like for me, I was certain, like if you reach this zone of 75% plus, you should be absolutely fine. 64% is still a pass, 67 is still a pass, obviously. But when you reach these scores, and if you're reaching them consistently, there's absolutely no reason to postpone your exam, because over time your scores will plateau and you're going to start to burn out, and it's going to be a horrifying experience for you. And last but not least, I want to say, don't bank on the idea that the exam is easy because it's now pass fail. You know, and you may hear that from students or your friends who aren't taking the step one. You may tell them I'm taking the step one, and they're going to say, oh, but it's pass fail now, it's easy. Trust me, it's not easy to pass. It's not easy at all. It's arguably the hardest test you'll take in your medical career. I told you guys that at the beginning. And just because it's pass fail now, it's still really, 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 really challenging to pass. In fact, the fail rates for the step one have been going up in 2022 because of that mentality, right? Because, for example, nowadays, when you solve an NBME test, long ago they give you a numerical score. So let's say a 230, for example, which is definitely a pass. Because remember, the minimum passing score for the step 1, like I said, is where was it? It's a 196, right? So if you score over here, if you go back to this section, this slide, sorry, 64%, they give you a percentage. And that percentage, they'll tell you, they give you the percentage, and then they're going to give you a probability. They're going to say your chances of passing the step 1 with this score within a week is like a 93%, I think it was. And for this one, it was a 67%. And the probability of passing was around 98%. So as far as it goes, these guys were passed, but still that was not good enough. You have to keep improving, because it's only a probability that you're going to pass. You know what I'm saying? I saw many people on Reddit, for example, who were scoring 50% and 40% on their exams, which is like a 50% chance of passing the test. And they were walking in and they would come out surprised that they failed, you know. And it's not a surprise, because just because they have a percentage that said you are most likely to pass this exam doesn't mean you're going to pass it for sure. Unless you're reaching scores of 81% or 78%, which means you're going to pass most likely, or 100% you're going to pass. Do not go to this test unless you feel completely ready for it. When this exam was numerical, you know, before it was a percentage like this, people would not dare to go to this exam, and they would postpone it multiple times until they were passing with high scores, like a 230 or 240 out of 300. So what I want to say is just, you know, if anything you should take away from this lecture is that this exam is not easy, you know, just because it's pass fail. I think it's still a pretty challenging exam. But like I said in the beginning, with adequate preparation and adequate, you know, scheduling, there's absolutely no reason why nobody should pass. And I'd like to close off with a few links. I'm sure this lecture is recorded, so you can take a look at this later. This link will tell you where to register and how to register and when to register for the step 1. You guys are taking it 2023, so registration opens in January. This will guide you on how to do it as an IMG. This is a video where I got my schedule from, the one that I showed you. It's from a YouTube channel called Med School Insiders. Highly recommended. Go watch it. Go to this link to get the schedule. And over here is just another link that explains the differences between the step 1, the step 2 CK, and the step 3. Questions, comments, concerns. Now is the time to ask. Like, this is it. This lecture is for you guys. So if you have any questions, anything at all, if you want me to repeat something, I have no problem. So speak up. Anyone.
Somebody from the chat wanted to know the name of the Anki deck.
Okay, yeah. So okay, I see they wrote it in the chat. So the name of the Anki deck is called King or Zanki. I'm just gonna, should I just write it in the chat, or yeah, I'm gonna write it in the chat. There's two of them. The one's called King and the one is called Zanki. They're not that hard to spell. You could find them on Reddit. Just write Zanki Reddit, and you know the first post will probably tell you where you could download them from. So next question, how was your experience with the exam itself? Did you find it easy? So on test day, like I told you, I just woke up, went to the test, felt very surreal, I remember. And I went to the test. I'll be honest, I don't remember most of my tests. That's just the way my mind deals with stuff. You know, as an experience, I did each section. I was confident of my answers. I remember I went out, took 10-minute breaks, went to the bathroom, ate my snack, drank water. And I found it challenging but doable. I think the best indicator of how you did specifically is right when you walk out of the exam. Like when I walked right out of my exam, I was like, you know what? I think I passed this exam. Obviously, I was nervous, and a few days after, I started thinking that I failed the exam, and that's something everyone feels. It's only natural. But as an experience, I found it challenging. But to be honest, I don't remember much of my exam. It's a repressed memory. To be honest, you can hand me the same exact exam right now, and I wouldn't believe it's the same exam. So as an experience, that's all I have for it. Like I said, just stay in the zone, stay prepared mentally, and really control your nerves. You're going to be nervous, but I think that rush of adrenaline that day is going to keep you going, and that's what I have to say about the experience for it. Any advice I wouldn't recommend? Yeah, sure. So we could go back for the resources here that I said. that I didn't use. I personally said don't waste time on Anki's or Firecracker products or Kaplan or Dr. Najeeb. I felt these were extremely long and extremely useless. That was my opinion. You're free to play around with them, but like I said, Kaplan is used for the step 3 specifically. So this is what I wouldn't recommend. But let me think. Is there something else I could recommend? 1 second. Any of us I'd recommend? I wouldn't recommend. Like I said, I wouldn't postpone my test unless I'm doing really bad. I wouldn't recommend not reviewing your NBME exams. You know, so reasonably with yourself, be honest with yourself. If you're taking practice tests and your exam is next week, and on your last one you scored a 40%, which means you have like a 30% chance of passing the test, just postpone the test, in my opinion. That's what I would do. You know, so it really depends on you and how you're doing specifically. So next question, YouTubers related to the USMLE that I like. Well, I just watched a lot of videos, USMLE Step 1 on YouTube it and just watch that. Specifically, like I said, I provided the link at the end of this video. I watch Med School Insiders. I think it's consistently the only medical channel that I watch, and I think this specific, it's the only specific YouTube channel that I use for the Step 1, so highly recommended. Med School Insiders on YouTube, so go for it. Next, is the first aid book from 2019, or should you buy the more updated one? So for me personally, I have the 2021 version, the international version for 2021. In my opinion, just get the 2022 one. The reason behind that is, surprisingly, as you all know, between 2021, 2020, and 2022, what happened was a COVID pandemic, and they actually included that on my test. I saw on test day, I had one question, I think, that asked me how would I test someone who had COVID. So I would recommend getting a updated book, preferably 2021, 2022, because they mentioned that the test is no longer numerical, it's just pass fail, and they include stuff specifically about COVID-19. That's important. Definitely don't use a book from 2018 or 2019 or like 2015. So in my opinion, get at least 2021 or above. So either 2021, 2022. I had to register. I don't know. Did I do in Prague? Yeah. So originally I wanted, I was planning on doing the exam in Berlin, but one of my friends eventually told me that in May, because they hadn't opened a place in Prague, right? So in May, one of my friends told me that they opened test spots in Prague and a test center in Prague. So I switched my exam to Prague. On test day, it was just me and 3 other students from Ostrava, I think, and they were Czech students. They weren't even English students. So yeah, it's possible to do in Prague. But like I said, keep in mind, if it makes a difference for you, anywhere that's outside of the US or Canada, you have to pay a $185 international fee for taking the exam. And what year of med school do you recommend we do the exam? So I would recommend that you do the exam after you finish all of your preclinical stuff. So for example, depends on how long your program is. I think all the ones in Czech Republic are 6 years. I don't think there's 5-year exams or 5-year or 4-year programs. So I'd recommend it specifically after you finish, like I said, all your preclinical stuff. For us in second faculty, it was when I finished pharmacology, which was at the end of 4th year specifically. That was my opinion. Like I said, there was some stuff that I've never seen before, like neurology and hematology, oncology. But for the most part, like I said, it's pathology based. So if you study pathoma really well in 3rd year, that's because we took pathology in 3rd year. If you study pathoma really well, you'll be fine on your own studying it. But definitely don't take it during 3rd year when you're starting to see pathoma, or after 2nd year, for example, because failing this test is not worth it. So in what year do I recommend taking it? That'll depend on you and when you finish the preclinical stuff. For me, when pharmacology was done, everything fell in place eventually, and I felt like I could start studying for this exam, and here we are now. It worked out absolutely fine. Next we have Talal. Talal asked, when do I get the results? So in general, they are between 2 or 3 Wednesdays from when you take the exam. So let's assume you took the exam today, right? And today is a Sunday, so it's not going to be this Wednesday, not the next Wednesday, but the one after that. So it's 3 Wednesdays or 2 Wednesdays usually. From Ricardo, he said that I heard that the registration ECFMG is changing from 2024. How will it be? Okay, I honestly don't have an answer to this question. I didn't see that personally for 2024. I haven't watched any medical videos recently. I was too busy. I don't have an answer to this one, Ricardo. I'm very sorry. So move on to the next one. How can we register for the exam? Like I said, go to I think UIMS can provide this lecture on their website, I think, and I know that this talk is being recorded, but if you look here, this link right here specifically will explain to you step by step when to register, what to register, what to send, and what websites you should use, because they're going to contact your faculty regardless to make sure that you're a student. So that's how you could register for the exam, through this link. Do I have any United States clinical experience? If not, am I planning on doing it before matching? Yes, absolutely. So a guy called Ali asked that question. I definitely want to do United States clinical experience, and I think everyone should do United States clinical experience. Now, it's a bit off topic for me, and I'm not the go-to source, so I'm just going off on a tangent of what I know specifically. So as you know, applying for the United States, you need three things essentially: your USMLE exam, clinical experience, and recommendation letters and research, right? So the USMLE is just one part of it, and clinical experience is even more important than USMLE, because these clinical experiences in the US will show that you want to work in the US, and they will get you recommendation letters from US doctors, and those are the recommendation letters those are the recommendation letters that will get you or will allow you to match in the US specifically. So do I plan on doing clinical experience? I absolutely do. The only issue is that to do a clinical experience or an elective in the US, you have to be a final year medical student according to most universities. So hopefully next year or sometime this summer even maybe. But one thing I want to tell you guys, make sure you pass the step one, because almost all of them or most of the programs that offer electives for international medical students require that you pass the step one. There are very, very few that don't require the step one in general, but most of the big gun hospitals require that you pass the step one. Next, how long do I wait for the results? I said between 2 or 3 Wednesdays. When are you planning on doing the step 2 CK? Ideally, I would like to do it maybe in June, stuff like that, in June, late June or early July. Personally, because I felt like the step 2 CK so far is built off the step 1. So I don't want to spend an entire summer again studying for it. Now the step 2 CK, I might spend an entire summer studying for it, who knows? Because the step 2 CK is still numerical, as we know. And I think now that the step 1 is pass fail, for what it's worth, you still have to pass it. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, it's extremely challenging. But I think most programs are now going to start looking at the step 2 CK in addition to your research and your clinical experience. But the step 2 CK is going to become the new objective score that they want to look at specifically. So would I study for it in the summer again? If it comes down to it, most likely. But I'm planning on doing it in June, and I already started studying for it specifically. I'm just solving question banks at this point. So that's my answer to that question. Are you doing any clinical rotations in the US? Like I said, I plan on doing them hopefully in 6th year. So thoughts about having United States clinical experience through companies such as AMO and Rotation Plus. Honestly, I don't know specifically through AMO and Rotation Plus. I know that most of them cost a lot, around 3,000 or 4,000 US dollars. So would I recommend it? I'm not sure. I think you're better off asking these questions specifically to someone who matched into residency. That's not my area of expertise yet, so I can't answer that one out specifically. You could just email every hospital in the US if you want. I mean, you could not every hospital in the US, but many people email a lot of hospitals and private clinics and eventually get an internship or something. So you could try doing that. But through companies, I know there's VSLO specifically. So or AMO or Rotation Plus, but I don't know the technicalities behind it specifically. Personally, for now, I'm just emailing hospitals, and I got some reply from some hospitals, so let's keep it at that. Ricardo asked, clinical experience should be done after step 2 CK or before, because I heard that you need 2 or 3 letters of recommendations minimum. So clinical experience are usually done after the step 1. Like I said, most programs require that you pass the step 1 specifically. Very few programs require that you don't pass any of them yet, or you don't take any of them yet, but very few require both the step 1 and the step 2 CK. I think that's like Harvard, for example, or some very, very prestigious medical school. It's true, you do need recommendation letters. Usually it's 1, maybe 2. I think so far for those clinical experiences, I think you're talking about recommendation letters for applying to clinical experiences, not residency. The 2-3 recommendation letters you can simply get from your own faculty if you get into research in your own faculty. You know, any type of research project you can get your hand on, just 1 recommendation letter or 2 would make a world's difference. So for clinical experiences, you do need recommendation letters sometimes, and you get those from doing research essentially at your faculty. So try to get into that. So I was asking, do you know how much you scored? It's a pass, like it's just a big pass. There's no numerical score, it's just pass, that's it. Ali once again was asking, do I have any research experience yet? If so, is it possible due to research experience at Charles University? I do have some research experience at the anatomy department in my faculty. That's where I lucked out the most. So that's some research I have there. If you want to do research, I'm not sure what year you are in ID specifically, but whatever interests you, try to email the head, explain to them, I'm highly interested in doing research in this specific department, and go from there. Really, just ask as many professors as you can in whatever interests you, and at the end of the day, someone will reply. It might not be a research project that you like, it might not be something that you look forward to, but like I said, just try to get one recommendation letter, because it's that recommendation letter that you could apply with the clinical experience that could get you an actual recommendation letter from doctors in the US, and that's what you want at the end of the day. So that's my experience in research. What was the time frame of the exam? Asked by Uzair. I'm not sure what this question means, time frame of the exam, but like I said before, it's an 8-hour exam. It starts for me at I think 8:30 a.m. So 1 hour, then a 10-minute break, then another block, then another 10-minute break, all the way until 4 or 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon. That's the way my exam was. Is research experience important or rather the publication? I think both are important, but I think having more research experience is the bigger one. It's hard to get published as a student, as a medical student. So I think anything you could get into and get a recommendation letter from an experience in general is highly useful when applying to clinical experiences, because eventually you will have to do clinical experience, and from there you'll get more recommendation letters, or you could possibly get a research elective in the US and get a recommendation letter from there. So does the research matter or the publications more? It depends what you're talking about. For residency applications, I'm sure it's the publications most likely. But yeah, that's the answer to my question, to your question, and that's all I see for questions in the text that are written. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask in person here? Just speak up. It's fine. Don't be shy. All right. Okay. So I guess nobody has questions.
Yes,
Forward.
so
Okay.
I
Yes.
am hoping the